to get started. If everybody could take their seats, please. Go ahead and open the meeting, and are there any bill introductions? Seeing no bill introductions, we'll move on. Committee, last night I sent an email to the Department of Labor to inquire as to how their reboot of the system went yesterday, issues that it might have caused for our constituents, and I would like them to review the 1099 issues and kind of run through how we can help our constituents with that. And so I told them I would give them the first 10 to 15 minutes of committee to address the committee with an update. And so maybe if we could do that for 10 minutes and then have about 5 minutes worth of questions, that would that work for you? Department of Labor, are you with us?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
So is that, Brett, is that you?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Brett Flashbarth on behalf of the agency, Deputy Secretary. We also have the usual team, Deputy Secretary Peter Brady, Senior Advisor Ryan Wright, as well as our Government Affairs Director Julie McGinney. Real quick, I would note we had hoped to have recently named Acting Secretary Amber Schultz on as well. Due to kind of the last minute, she had a scheduling conflict, but she's definitely looking forward to appearing before the committee as soon as possible and introducing herself to all of you.
We're looking forward to meeting her as well and helping her find solutions. You want to go ahead and start with your update? Give us a little update on how it went yesterday and any future concerns.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and we'll move quickly. And again, we're getting real-time information. If I forget something, we'll be pretty fluid in terms of the rest of the team chiming in. So the big issue over the weekend, as you know, is we did take the system offline to get a handle on some of the fraud issues, as well as to do that implementation of the identity verification and multi-factor authentication tools that I think we've testified we really feel are a game changer in this space. So the team worked through the weekend. That was successfully implemented. We did come back online at 7 a.m. yesterday with those tools in place. And again, we're getting kind of real, almost hourly updates in terms of the ongoing status. Just an initial number that really puts context on this. Since 7 a.m. yesterday, we have recorded 576,405 failed login attempts that we suspect of being fraudulent attempts generating from bots and other activity. Those aren't attempted weekly claims filing, but that's just showing the mass of attempts to interact with the system that we have picked up and been able to prevent just since 7 a.m. We're over the 500,000 mark. In terms of valid Kansans needing assistance, it's in the about 45,000 that have attempted to log in. We have about 27,000 that have successfully completed that process. We've got a little over 5,000 where that's initially failed. That doesn't mean that there's an issue there, that for whatever reason user error, they made a mistake fingering at something in the system is preventing them, and they're going to be able to come back and try again. And then there's also about 13,000 where it's still awaiting action, where they maybe didn't finish the application, got in the middle of something, what have you. So the preliminary feedback in terms of the implementation from the technical teams, we're working through some issues, but very successful in terms of the deployment. And then also very successful in terms of the massive number of bot attempts and things of that nature that we have already stopped. I do want to note, we did have some system issues unrelated to this that has gotten conflated a little bit. We attempted to do a PUA deployment, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. There were some programming errors there that did result in some user issues and some system downtime. That was not related to the implementation of these tools. That was a separate issue, which kind of reinforces that we have to walk and chew gum and juggle and ride a bike at the same time right now with the multiple challenges on the system. We're trying to do multiple things at one time. And unfortunately, we did hit a snag with some of the PUA code, but it's our updates are that we feel those issues have been addressed as of last night. I'm going to pause and see if, because again, this is very much real-time information, see if anyone else on the team wants to augment what I've said or clarify anything that I've said. Peter or Ryan, anything to add?
Yeah, this is Peter Brady for the agency. One thing I wanted to clarify from what Brett was saying. So the total number of claimants that have interacted with the system was just north of 45,000, like he was saying. An important distinction is about 27,000 have completed the ID verification part. There's another 13,000 that have successfully registered with the Okta system, but they're either waiting to do the ID proofing part or they're waiting to do the multi-factor authentication. The universe that Brett mentioned that failed ID proofing, that could be a combination of someone who didn't remember all the information from the credit history questions. Their next step would be to call into the LexisNexis call center to verify their identity. That could also be someone who is attempting to do ID theft and victimize someone, and the system successfully realized that it's not who they say they are and prevented them from moving further. So just wanted to provide a little bit more context behind what those different numbers mean.
Thank you for that. So the ID verify is just basically they kicked out 27,000. So the 500,000 plus attempts, they never got to the ID verify. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct, Chairman. Those are attempts that did not get that far in the system. They were stopped at the front door, so to speak.
And the 45,000 figure that you gave us for people that got through the system, those weren't initial new claims, right? Those were ongoing claims, most likely?
Yeah, most of them will be existing claimants who had already been interacting with the system that just got registered in this new front door.
It's my understanding when somebody gets kicked out of the ID verify, is there a call that's automatically generated to them, or do they have to pick up the phone and call a number? And if so, is there somebody that's answering those phones right away? Or do they go, is it like the other unemployment phone line?
It is not run through our contact center. LexisNexis does all the ID proofing, so the phone call they place is to LexisNexis. Ryan or Brett can jump in if I'm misspeaking, but the process flow is that if someone were to fail the ID proofing, they're then given the phone number to call LexisNexis, and then they go through a more intensive review with more questions. And if they pass there, LexisNexis updates that in the system, so it updates on the back end. In the instances that someone fails that second part of the ID proofing, they send a list of those names to our staff each day to do further review.
Okay, so when they do call in to LexisNexis, are they guaranteeing that they're going to pick up the phone? As you know, there's been a lot of frustration with people trying to call in over and over and being denied. And so when I say being denied, they can't get through. That's what you're saying, is that's not going to happen on the ID verification because it's not being handled by us. It's being handled by a company that can handle that kind of call volume.
That is correct, Chairman. And I'll defer to Brett if he wants to speak. I know he did a lot of the work getting set up with our different partners. If there's any provisions or requirements in our contract with them related specifically to call center responsiveness, I think there might be, but I'll defer to Brett on that.
Director, I think you're muted.
Gets me every time. And I would note real quick for committee staff, can we double check and make sure that Ryan Wright has permission to speak? I think he tried to talk there briefly, and we've hit a couple snags and making sure that he's listed as being able to add.
I think we did that on purpose.
Can we do that here too? Sorry, Ryan. Thank you for that, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have service level agreements built in there, and that should not be an issue in terms of that LexisNexis service. And bear in mind, that's going to be a smaller group of people, a much smaller population of folks who are having issues to get assistance there. So we'll track that along with everything else. If we're receiving feedback from customers, or if you are getting constituents that they have attempted to access that and they're not receiving that service, we definitely want to hear about that, but that is not something that we anticipate being an issue. And again, I do want to note, because there's so many things going on, issues that some of your constituents may have had yesterday are likely unrelated to the ID verification and authentication process. There was issues related to some PUA code that was deployed that had some programming errors, and we feel we have that resolved. So we're confident over the next week, kind of some of these smaller issues are going to be ironed out, and the system's going to be performing at a very high level.
Well, that's certainly good news to hear. I'm glad that we're moving in that direction, or at least in the right direction, and it seems to be beneficial. We're hoping on our end that it kind of frees up some customer service ability in your department, and that leads me to a question on the call center. One of the biggest issues, and we discussed this briefly earlier, is that when people call in, we've got this call center that we've contracted with, we've trained them, but people are calling in, and I've yet to talk to somebody that actually got through the line. And so my question is, how many people are actually taking calls on a daily basis in that call center, and what can we do to expand that? We need to get that. The biggest issue, sir, as you know, is there are people out there that have legitimate claims, but because of all this fraudulent activity and all these phone calls, they can't. And now we've got step A solved, and it's time to get to the people that really have a need. How are we going to do that? So how many callers do you have now, and how many do we need to handle the call volume?
Okay, let me try and tackle this because there's a lot of layers there. So one, you're correct. This issue takes a lot of kind of the noise out of the system. So it allows us to get a little bit clarity, and it's going to be kind of one of the points of triangulation to get a better understanding of what the real workload coming is, and also help us drill down on some of those fraud numbers that we know this once, and we want to get to you and get those in accurate form. So that's kind of phase one. When you're talking call volume, there's a lot of factors that go into that, and we've seen ebbs and flows. I mean, it's been a super high rate since the onset of the pandemic, but for example, this fall we were weathering the volume much better. The super heightened numbers we're seeing right now are probably a confluence of a couple different things, and Peter can jump in here as well. First is there's a substantial number of that call volume that is being driven specifically related to the Continued Act programs and those implementations, okay? So as we make progress implementing the Continued Act, we've already got FPUC up and running. We've got a pretty favorable update on pandemic emergency unemployment compensation that I don't think we want to go on record yet of a specific date, but we feel comfortable in terms of, at this point, in terms of being able to implement that sooner rather than later. We're going to see some of those call volumes be driven down because that's what a lot of people are calling on. Of when are these programs going to be in place? When am I going to get my benefits? Additionally, there's a lot of traffic related to the 1099 process, which we can speak to separately. And you just also have a winter workload factor of construction-related jobs, things of those nature that we see even in non-pandemic times. So there's a kind of a perfect confluence of events right now that are driving an elevated call volume beyond what we normally see. We will circle back. This came up in Senate Ways and Means, and honestly, we just did not have time offline between Senate and House. We will provide the committee specific metrics on the number of calls that are being answered. I understand your frustration in the sense that you're hearing from the claimants that can't get through, but we are servicing a large number of claimants every day, but the call volume is exceeding that. In terms of staffing, we have up to 450 staff that are engaged in the customer service process in one way or another. So we've added a substantial surge amount.
And sir, can you tell me how many of those are answering calls? 450 staff, how many are answering calls?
Peter, do we have the specific staffing numbers on those? Or are we working to get those for the other committee as well?
That's part of what we're working to get to the other committee so we can ensure that we follow up with the exact number answering the phone.
But it's orders of magnitude beyond what we started with the original pandemic.
Okay, so you'll get that number to us later today?
Yep, we do have numbers. We do have measurements from the system in terms of calls that are being answered and customers being serviced. That's something we can pull.
Okay, and we also want to know how many you think it will take on a temporary basis to service all these Kansans. We've got people losing their cars. We've got people that can't eat, haven't gotten a red cent since March that we really need to help. And so if there's anything we can do on our end to find funding to increase the call center, we'll do everything we can for you. So just if you can give us the information, we'll do everything we can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we appreciate that cooperation. And it's definitely going to be a team effort in the long term. And obviously, we've talked about a lot of this is going to come to, the modernization and that component of it as well moving forward. So 1099s, just to touch on that briefly, because again, that's another topic. So we've addressed the identity theft nationwide. There was a lot of confusion amongst the states in terms of how that process would work out. In fairness to the IRS, they had to work through these issues too, because this is something they haven't had to deal with on a large scale like this. The IRS did promulgate guidance to the states that if we could establish that a claim was due to identity theft, we would not have to issue a 1099. Okay, that guidance came a little late in the process. Some states have actually gone ahead and issued 1099s to entire claimant populations, unfortunately. We did make a concerted effort to try and screen as many as possible from those folks we've identified as being victims of identity theft from receiving a 1099. We did have some data quality issues in terms of that initial run. So we do know that there is a portion of folks we're trying to drill down on that did receive a 1099 if they were the victim of ID theft. We have a resolution process in place where they can contact us and get that corrected. And there's also a portion we're attempting to identify on our own and proactively issue a revised 1099 to not reflect any amounts that were not actually paid to that individual. So the 1099s have been issued, and then resolving any errors in those, also trying to drill down and make sure that we resolve anyone who was the victim of identity theft. Not having a 1099 is an ongoing process that we're going to be working through over the next few weeks. And again, we have dedicated call center staff specific to that issue. And I'll pause there and see if Ryan or Peter wants to elaborate on that.
Okay, I want to follow up on that real quick, though. The 1099s, so we've asked about that in the past because I think we all saw that coming. You saw that coming. We saw that coming. Yep. And your Department of Revenue and the Department of Labor, I know, have a separate phone line for that. We received an email last night from Julie McGinney, which detailed it quite well, and that appears to be working. But we were told that, like you just said, you were going to flag as many as you can, and every single one of them, and it probably wasn't going to be an issue. Everyone in this state house has received many phone calls on 1099s, and so there's quite a few of them that snuck through. But how many 1099s did you flag and not send?
Did we flag and not send? I will have to circle back on that specific number, and I apologize. We've been jumping from meeting to meeting. We can definitely get that to the committee. It was a substantial portion that we identified as not sending. So we'll get that number. It's in the tens of thousands.
Okay. Thanks for that. I appreciate it. And then
yeah, and I apologize for sure. That's probably should have that coming in. That's a good question.
And as far as the ID theft victims, has the department thought about what we can do for all the Kansans that have had their identity stolen, whether it's our fault or not? I mean, is there a way to give everybody ID protection more than just sending them to a website? Can we purchase like an insurance for them so that they don't lose their house?
I don't see an avenue, and again, the underlying ID theft is not directly related to the state. And I know we've testified to that, but there is no indication we've received that these instances of ID theft are traceable to a breach of a state system. And we know this because every single state is dealing with these large scale ID thefts. So in terms of the state having the resources or a legal responsibility to go beyond, I just don't see that as being feasible. What our responsibility is to the extent it engages with state programs like unemployment insurance, is to provide as much information as we can, which we've done through our fraud reporting, where giving them the credit agencies and things of that nature, putting them in touch with the right resources to address the issue as comprehensively as possible, and then making sure we get them a correct and accurate 1099 so there's no undue tax burden that they shouldn't have the responsibility to bear. In terms of ongoing credit monitoring of things of those nature, I'm not aware of a resource that the state could provide to them that we would be able to offer. Because again, the underlying data breaches are not tied to the state. We have had some individualized instances. Unfortunately, for example, our unemployment appeals It's a very manual process. And from time to time, we'll send, the wrong information to the wrong claimant. We do offer credit protection in those instances where it's directly attributable to the agency, where, again, someone put the wrong case in the wrong file. But in terms of this, where the data breaches are nationwide and systemic to broader society, that's just not something we have the ability to do.
All right, on the ones that we do take ownership of, what's it cost to protect that person's credit?
I'd have to circle back with fiscal on that. It's not a substantial cost, but if you apply that to a much larger universe, I think it would be pretty substantial. So we circle back on that. And again, when I'm talking like 4 people, that sort of thing, not
Right. I was just thinking in the case that we ended up having to, I would want to try to figure out like a fiscal note on a bill that we might introduce to help protect people's credit. But in the interest of time, we're gonna have to move on. Representative Clayton has 2 questions for you, and then we're gonna have to cut off. We are interested in hearing from the new secretary and find out why the heck she wanted this job for the first thing. But yeah, it'd be nice to see what she's thinking as far as solutions goes, and hopefully we can get her in here sometime next week.
She did come back to the office this week, so I think she's engaged for the long haul, Mr. Chair. So
Okay, great. Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll make these relatively quick. Just going back to this rampant identity theft and fraud, is this a federal issue? Is this an issue that our AG needs to look at, at least from the prosecution and stopping this? Because I know that you all are doing what you can, but obviously given the system issues, you're not able to stay on top of this. I see this as, an attack on our government and on our citizens and on our businesses. So who do we get to go after these criminals?
That's an excellent question, Representative Clayton. I don't think we have seen the sort of national concerted law enforcement effort in response to this that probably is justified in light of the scope of this nationwide. I can tell you that here locally, we have been in communication with the U.S. Attorney's Office. We have been in communication with the FBI in terms of developing prosecutable cases. We spoke with them last week. We're speaking with them again next week. We're actively engaged with the U.S. DOL Office of Inspector General. So to the extent we can here in Kansas try and identify organized activity, we're working through our federal law enforcement partners on these more sophisticated activities. But I have personally not seen sort of a kind of a national response that would probably be merited when you're talking the amounts of federal dollars that have likely been paid out through fraud schemes. So our local federal partners have been working with us. We're going to continue that effort. But I have not seen anything at a national level in terms of responding to this.
Well, perhaps we can start advocating our federal government for some assistance for our citizens. And then my second question is regarding, so we talked about call volume. I have heard from a number of Kansans, some of them are talking about using auto dialers themselves, and I know that individuals can use them, and I understand why, right? But how much in the auto dialer standpoint do you think is coming from, again, criminals? So I'm just not in the mood for criminals today, guys. So let's tell me a little bit more about that, because I wonder how much the auto dialers have to do with the jammed phone lines.
So the auto dialers are a problem, and we've seen this pop up early in the pandemic. And again, any of the team can jump in. I think in terms of the criminal activity, it's more web-based that those attempts are coming in. So that's where the bots are more problematic. We do see well-intentioned claimants who have attempted the auto dialers. I think our messaging has been pretty consistent that does not help, first of all, and it just creates more problems for the claimant population in general. It overwhelms the system. So I know this frustration. I empathize greatly with everyone who's trying to access service and in need of services, but the auto dialers just create a thing where the overall demand is something that we can't match up with. So I would just strongly urge everyone to not use an auto dialer and just we will continue to add services, we will continue to add resources, and through a combination of efforts, hopefully be able to drive down that call volume demand by getting the programs implemented and some other measures that are underway.
All right, and so basically auto dialers are not so much bad guys as they are just people who are using any means they can to get through.
Yeah, that's a base level. I mean, I don't think we have a complete handle on all uses, but again, for the organized criminal activity, we're more seeing the web presence on that. Peter or Ryan, is there anything you would add on that?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So in the interest of time, we're going to have to close it there, guys. A lot of valuable information. We appreciate you taking the time once again to come before us, and you know, we're all rooting for you. So hopefully we can get through this sooner than later, and we'll meet with you next week for sure.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and move on here. Rest of the day, the discussion on unemployment insurance issues, and we had some businesses that wanted to come in and talk about some of their problems and issues before us. And with that, we'll start with Amber Nieses. I believe she's with Airbus, right? Welcome to committee.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Chairman and committee. My name is Amber Nieses. I currently work for Airbus in Wichita, Kansas. I support, from the senior HRBP level, employees in the state of Kansas, Alabama, and California as well. We currently have about 173 active workforce employees and about 30 temps right now in the state of Kansas. I also support clients in California and Alabama and have not had the number of fraudulent claims come in from those locations as I have from the state of Kansas. I'm a smaller employer in the state of Kansas, so I represent a smaller number, so my numbers will be smaller when I talk about them here in a minute. Of the 173 direct employees that I've had since the beginning of 2020 during the pandemic, we've had approximately 40, this is a very low estimate, employees have fraudulent claims against them in regards to unemployment claims. That's a low number because I rely on the employees telling me that they've had a fraudulent claim, other than the ones that come into my office. Of all the employee and the fraud claims that came in, there's a couple of different ways that they come in and the information that I get. The employee receives a determination of benefits letter to their home address is one way. The employer receives one either to the Kansas office or our corporate office, which is in Herndon, Virginia, or any combination of those comes in as well. We do also get some in through the SIDES electronic filing system that come in as well. So those are the many different ways that all these come in. In regards to the above-mentioned fraud notifications, I would say the bulk of them have been determination letters that come to the employees' homes. It's pretty stressful when an employee calls me and says, have I been let go? Are we doing a layoff? Is this my notice? You know, things like that that come in. So when a letter is mailed to our corporate office, there is quite a delay that goes on. So Herndon, Virginia is not working from the office. They have downsized their group, and the current philosophy prior to the pandemic was that they do not fight unemployment claims. They have a great support system that's in the EU system, and they don't fight the unemployment claims. They always just paid them out as they came. They did not have a process in place. They were not responding to claims, and they were not in the office to receive the ones that came in through the mail system. When they came to the office in Kansas, and I received them, which was a small number of them, I did file the claims as fraud when they came into the office. There were a small group of employees that in 2020, we did have a small reduction, a voluntary reduction. Some of those were in the fraudulent claims, and after they were no longer employed with Airbus, could not file a claim because they had previously had an unemployment fraud claim on them as well. The best, most conservative estimate that I can make, and this is a very, very small estimate, and it's because I don't have visibility of the claim numbers or how many weeks or things like that, is that of the 40 claims, when you multiply it by the average weekly claim payout of $358 since the beginning of the pandemic, is just around $14,000. This is a very, very, very small conservative estimate in regards to kind of what we're looking at in response to Airbus. The estimate's based on 1 week of claims, and it's based on the average amount, where I would say 90% of my employees are going to get the full amount for the unemployment claim that comes out. In Kansas, our employees, we have communicated on several occasions in regards to fraud claims that come out. I've probably sent out 3 or 4 emails that go out to all of our employees telling them how to file fraud claims, what information to look for, what information to be on the watch for in regards to what might be coming up. I get calls from managers, I get calls from employees, and I spend time talking with them and counseling with them through the process. Even though communication comes out, as soon as they get a claim, they call the HR department, and we go through the process again. Communication with employees after they receive a fraud claim probably goes anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. Each call comes in kind of a little bit differently. Engineers are very detailed, so they want a very specific list of what they need to do in order to stop this. They also want to know how it happened. Was it a breach on Airbus's database? Was it a breach for the state of Kansas? How did they get our information? What do they have? All the kinds of processes that you go through in your mind when you have identity theft happen to you. So in regards to that, the drafting communications, spending hours visiting and managing expectations with leaders and managers in my organization, talking with their teams in regards to things that come up and those kind of things. Just recently this week after I drafted this email, the 1099-Gs that they spoke about for the Department of Labor hit the mailboxes starting this Saturday. I've had 5 calls of ones that were fraudulent. I've started my communication on the process, just like the DOL has laid out online, so they can log in, file a dispute, and start that process on disputing their 1099 form. Unfortunately, I think in the beginning when the unemployment fraud cases came in, people were getting case numbers. I know this because I had a fraud claim. I did file the fraud claim. I did get a case number, but I don't think in every instance they got a case number for their fraud claim. And on the 1099 dispute form, it requires that you put a police report case number down there. I do think they were able to still go ahead and submit that dispute form without the case number, but it is asking, and I don't think everybody has that access to that case number. In conclusion, I'd like to relay the amount of confusion and stress that this adds to already stressful work-life balance situations that our employees are facing in everyday life. I know I'm a small employer in Kansas, and I'm just here kind of letting you know what it means to the average person out there in a working environment when they have identity theft issues, which they're very concerned about, and work-life balance issues, how to manage their kids' virtual home life, what's my workplace going to look like in the long run. So thank you for taking the time to listen, and I'll take questions if you have any.
Thanks so much for coming all the way in to talk to us today. I had a question regarding, you said it was roughly $14,000 a week that you thought was being paid out.
No, the $14,000 in total was my estimate, in the very, very, very low estimate of what these claims were paid out for the 40 employees that I have documented that have received fraud claims since the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay, and it's been speculated that with our unemployment trust fund going to 0 and beyond very soon, that your unemployment rates will go up by as much as 800%, in which case your unemployment rate will be higher than your state income tax. How are you going to sustain that as a small business in Kansas?
As a small business in Kansas, I'd say it would be a significant cost adjustment for us. We are in a strict cost containment scenario situation. Some of the strategies that they're putting in place going forward would be more favorable to working from home permanently in a remote environment, which would lead to less Kansas employees.
I was afraid of that. Any further questions? Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming here today. I have a question. Why would more people working from home lead to less employees? I know that my husband's business, still, we have no idea when he'll be going back to work in person, and they're actually saving on overhead. So why does that lead to more layoffs?
You're correct, and that's a very good question. So Airbus employs about 2,000 people in the United States itself, or all over the United States and the country as well. If we can attract engineers that are in other areas because it's a remote environment, there would be a significant increase in that area.
Let us know if there's anything we can do to help with that. And thank you for coming today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none. Thanks again for coming in and sharing. Okay. Next up in person, we have Holly Macy. Thanks for coming in, and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chairman Tarwater and committee for having us today and giving us this opportunity to share our experiences as well with the unemployment benefits fraud situation. My name is Holly Mace. I'm the HR director for Sunflower Supports Company here in Topeka, and along with me is Mary Ann Hughes. She's our president and CEO. Just for some background information, Sunflower Supports Company provides day and residential services for adults that have intellectual disabilities. We employ approximately 65 to 70 employees, all here in Topeka, and that includes direct support and management staff. Before 2020 happened, and years prior to that, our unemployment claims on average, we probably received 1 to 2 a month at the max. Those obviously increased last spring. And then when the fraudulent claims started happening, just since mid-December of 2020, we've received notices of 19 claims total. Of those, we know 14 are for sure fraudulent. 2 of those happened to be for myself, and 1 happened to be for Mary Ann, and then other direct support staff and management team members. Based on the information we've received on the potential charges to our benefits account, these claims could result in a total account charge to us of $95,700. That's approximately 6% of our annual payroll each year. For your reference, a typical biweekly payroll for us is $70,000 on the high side. The potential account charges aren't the only cost to our company. This is also costing us administrative time on my part. Like I said, we're a small company. I'm the HR director. All these claims that come in, I'm the one responsible for answering them and submitting that information. We do respond to every claim that comes in, fraudulent or not. A typical unemployment claim can take anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour to complete, just based on various factors. The employee's reason for leaving employment, corrective action involved, any other documentation we may have to scan and submit. When these claims are known to be fraudulent, in addition to that process, I'm still reporting each one that I know to be fraudulent. I've been doing it online through the Department of Labor's site. We have multiple employees that have more than one job. So if I know they don't work many hours for us and they work full-time elsewhere, I'm taking the time to call them and just verify that they really haven't filed for unemployment with their other employer, because I don't want to do anything to harm them if they're legitimately trying to get unemployment benefits. So those calls can take about 5 to 10 minutes just to verify, for my knowledge, if it's really fraudulent or not. And then there is, like was previously mentioned, there's just the time taken to talk to the employees that have been affected and what their next steps need to be, and providing them the information to either report the fraud themselves online or over the phone. For some employees, that call can take 10 to 15 minutes. For other employees, those calls have taken up to an hour of my time. And then there's follow-up calls and follow-up questions for days afterwards. I have been providing handouts to employees to give them information as well. Now with the potential of getting the 1099-G forms, we haven't gotten any calls on that yet. I'm kind of anticipating those are coming, but just as of now, we haven't received any. So in conclusion, we just wanted to kind of provide you guys with a snapshot of, how this is affecting us as a smaller business and our employees. And we appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Well,
thanks so much for the information and for coming in. And most importantly, thanks for employing over 60 Kansans. That's pretty nice, up here in Topeka especially. Are there any questions? Seeing none. Oh, Representative Highland has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On this, I see you say $95,699, and you're estimating that's your potential account charge. Please explain that, would you?
What I did is when we get the paperwork in the mail that's for each individual, the fraudulent claims, it'll say on there like the potential charges to your company, and it gives you the total amount. So for each of the claims that I knew were fraudulent, I totaled those up out of those 14 claims.
Thank you. Great job. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Seeing no further questions, thanks for coming in. We're going to move to our virtual conferees now. There is Shelby Moss online.
Thank you, Chairman Tarwater. This is Shelby Moss, and I am the Director of HR for Sheridan County Hospital in Hoxie, Kansas. We're a very small, rural, critical access hospital. And I wanted to visit with you guys today and bring up our side of things that we're witnessing as an employer. And our biggest thing has been the time constraint that it takes to recognize these as fraud and then get a hold of employees or previous employees, if we even still have a correct phone number on them, to find out if they are fraud, and then how to direct that employee to claim that as fraud. And then the onslaught of questions, just like everybody else has said, of how did they get my information? How do you know? Was this a breach on your side? So not having the answers to those questions is very hard and very difficult to explain to someone that's already in a stressful situation. Being in healthcare, the last year has been really rough on our employees. Obviously, it's been rough on everybody. But it's been really rough, and that's just one more thing added to their plate, and it's detrimental as HR to, we're here to build up employees and boost their morale and do what we can for them, and here we're feeling like we're tearing them down sometimes, so that's very hard. And thankfully, unlike some of the other industries, we were able to keep our staff employed, and we didn't have to do layoffs or anything like that. And we were able to receive PPP funding. So we honestly didn't even see the unemployment claims start until November. We got a few, but then December and January really hit us hard. And I was on quarantine and at home with my kids. And so trying to communicate with employees, not in person and over the phone, and explain to them and go through that process. And we have quite a few older employees that are not real tech savvy. So they were trying to do it on the phone and trying to get through on the phone, and constantly just in the middle of being on hold, they would get hung up on. And so then they would call me back and say, I don't know what to do. I don't have a computer at home. Can you help me do this? So it was an extremely time-consuming process. And then just recently, in the last 15 days or so, we stopped receiving the notices from sides on our email. And I know that's been kind of a statewide thing, it seems like, from several of my counterparts that have in other facilities that have said that. And so I thought it was slowing down, and then come to find out, I was just curious. I'm like, man, I haven't seen any for a while. I went out on the sides portal, and I have 14 sitting there that I didn't even know were there, and they're due the next day. And if we don't get them taken care of, then they potentially will get paid out and they're fraud, or we think they're fraud. So the communication, I feel like, from Department of Labor, and maybe I'm just not looking in the right spot, but that has been a huge sore spot that we're not getting information that I feel like could be very beneficial to us to help combat this. And, you know, not only are our emails not working now from the sides portal, and so we have to go in and manually look at that, but then we don't always get the paper in the mail. So we either get the email, we get the paper in the mail, or the employee gets the paper in the mail and they tell us that they have this claim sitting out there. And then to try and figure out, when we got that very first one in August, of how to help that person go through that process, that was before the fraud website was up and going, or that I knew was up and going. And so that was very manual for him as well. And then just in the last 24 hours, we've had a lot of 1099s hit employee mailboxes, and them coming in and saying, you told me if I reported this on the website and did all of these things, that would stop it, but it didn't. I got this 1099. How do I do it? And so not only helping them report that as fraud, but now the 1099 dispute on top of that is taking even more time. And I did go in and add up, just like the previous gal, our potential charges on our benefits mailing, and ours equaled $305,004.01. And that was just on the ones that we received in the mail, the paper that we would receive. And I probably have about 10 or so that I never received a paper on, that we don't have that official amount. So that would be a huge, huge hit to us as a small employer, and could really affect healthcare in Northwest Kansas.
Okay, wow. So it seems like it's an awful lot of work for you to just try to stay on top of it. How many employees do you have out there?
We average right at 170, and that's total with full-time, part-time, and our PRN employees that work once a month or whatever. And we've had a lot of our PRN employees actually affected, and so they get the phone call from us and their main employer and maybe their previous employer as well.
I'll just know that you know, most of the businesses that we're going to talk to today, and the ones that have already spoken, they're concerned about their charges and they're concerned about their unemployment rate. Our intent is, or at least my intent, is to hold businesses harmless so that your rates won't be affected. We're still trying to figure out the best way to do that, and we're going to do everything we can to do so. So any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thanks for taking the time today, and thanks for holding so long.
Yes, thank you so much.
Next we have Mickey DeBrecht.
Yes, thank you. Hello, Mr. Chair. Thanks for allowing me to speak today. Again, my name is Mickey DeBrecht, and I'm the administrator of a small surgical practice here in Wichita, Kansas. We have 21 employees total, and we've had approximately 38% of our workforce that's been affected by the fraudulent claims. And the biggest, not the biggest concern, but I think the biggest thing that I struggle with as an employer and a manager of employees is much of my time is spent trying to reassure these employees that the breach did not happen within our network or our systems. It's a very violating feeling to know that your Social Security number is floating out around there somewhere. And we felt compelled to try and reassure the employees. And so one of the things we did, although my story is not different than anyone else's that you've heard from, one of the things we did is actually file a cyber claim, and went to the expense of having an additional company and some attorneys come in, install some software, look at our systems to ensure that our data points were not accessed and that the breach was not on our end. And although I think that provided the employees with some reassurance, it's still a little bit of an uneasy feeling for me to not be able to tell them you're protected, you're okay, because I can't answer that question for them. Many of them have gone to their own, on their own accord, have gone to their own expense of either purchasing additional, increasing their own identity theft coverage, or they have purchased it when they didn't have it before. And I've gotten, the question, I think this was mentioned earlier, someone said, you should pay for this as my employer. This is happening because of you. And that's just something that's difficult to explain to the employees. But financially, that would be a burden on this organization to have to purchase that for every employee. And again, I'm not sure it's, the breach isn't occurring on our end. So that's something that we did, and I think it helped, but it hasn't, it hasn't made everyone feel comfortable. But the expense of that cyber claim that we made, and everyone looking at our systems, we still have bills coming in, but we're nearing about $25,000 on that right now. Going back to the 38% of claims that have been fraudulently filed, if I don't know yet, because as Shelby mentioned, the information that we're receiving is pretty inconsistent from the site, but the potential payout, if these claims were approved for us, I think would be a little over $5,000 a week. So, it adds up. And the side system, although I'm grateful to be able to report online, it's not very user-friendly. For example, it'll allow you to click a box that says the employee is still actively employed, but then it requires you to put in a last day worked. So in addition to spending the amount of time that we're spending talking to employees to try and reassure them and help them through the process, just trying to dispute a claim is a frustrating and time-consuming process. I now have a standard letter that I send as an attachment to each claim that says this employee, it was a fraud claim, and I just send it as an attachment, because the information that I'm entering earlier, as far as putting in a last day work, et cetera, it's just not very user-friendly. I think what I'm most concerned about all of this is our experience rating and our tax rate going up. I mean, 800% it's a lot of money. And I don't know, I'm not sure what we would do in that, with respect to that, if it does happen. So I don't really have anything additional to add, other than it's an incredibly frustrating process. I feel an incredible amount of empathy for those that do have legitimate claims that can't receive their unemployment right now because of this issue. And it's very unfortunate. So I'm happy that steps are being taken to improve the system. But it has caused an incredible amount of stress on us as an employer from a financial perspective, but more importantly on the employees that work here. So thank you.
For your report. Committee, are there any questions? Thanks for the incredible amount of detail there, and we're sorry you're going through this. Hopefully we'll find solutions soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Nicole Gillock.
Good afternoon, Chairman, and thank you for having us here today. My name is Nicole Gillock, and I am the Human Resources Manager at Vornado Air in Andover. We do employ about 140 people full-time, everybody right here in Andover. For those that don't know, we are a manufacturer of consumer home products, fans, heaters, air cleaners, and humidifiers. So we have been able to continue business all of 2020 due to the products we make being in high demand. But we have been about half and half remote versus obviously our warehouse and production facility workers have to be here to get their jobs done. So they've been here, and then most of us who are in the office have been remote the majority of the time. We started to receive, my story is really not that different than anybody else that's already spoken today. We've started to receive the claims in about October, and then they slowed down for a while, and then December was really heavy for us. We have had about 30% of our full-time active employees affected by this. And then we've also been able to identify 20 others that no longer worked here prior to 2020 that we were able to contact, that we received claims for, and identified those as fraud as well. Some things that haven't been mentioned that I have experienced, I've had multiple employees have claims filed under previous legal names, so maiden names, previous addresses from when they were growing up, their parents' houses, things like that, that are still tied to their name. And we've even had some that were filed with our business address as their home address. So it's all been very odd, and there's no way to identify one way or another what's more common. We've had every one of those examples multiple times. And just now, with the 1099s, it feels like after we assured the employees through communications ongoing throughout the year, every time somebody would be affected in this way, giving them the information like others have stated, that they have been frustrated with the process, frustrated with us, not really trusting that it would be possible that it would not be a data breach on our end. So just the lack of answers, I think, that they have for how this could have happened and how their social security numbers are really the only thing that consistently was correct. As I said, the names and the addresses were not always current. So obviously a high worry point there for such a sensitive piece of information. And not being able to give them the answers, and then saying that we had filed it and that it would be that they could also take their own action and go do identity protection if they felt that that was necessary to continue to monitor their credit reports and bank information and whatnot. And while we haven't had anybody report to us that they have had any further issues, thankfully, just now that 1099s are coming out and it's showing that they have claimed unemployment funds and need those forms, obviously, to file their taxes. I even had one employee come to me the other day, and his 1099 was only for $1,000, and he was contemplating just filing his taxes with it and saying that it happened because he didn't want to deal with the system, knowing that no one was going to answer the phone, that it was going to be a long process. Since it was a small amount, he was just not willing to deal with it. So I just think everybody's situation is different and unique in how this is affecting them. And just, yeah, from an employer standpoint, like the others said, it's very time consuming. It disintegrates trust between our employees and us as an employer, and has taken a lot of our staff time. I haven't done any of the numbers regarding potential account charges, because actually I do not receive very many paper claims. I usually am receiving them through the portal. The paper claims that I'm aware of mostly have been received by employees at their homes. The couple that I do receive here, like I said, I haven't added up the totals. And we have a very, very low turnover rate. So in an average year, I would do maybe 5 to 8 claims. And now, as I stated, I'm up in the 60s so far for just the last half of 2020. And also, one other thing I wanted to point out. Sorry, I lost my place here. Oh, yes. Oh, sorry, that was just, yeah, that I have 5 to 8 claims per year normally, and I haven't ever had to spend this much time on this. And it's the first year using the portal, and like the previous representative said, that she has the user-friendly issues. I agree with that 100%. It's frustrating that you can check a box saying that you'd believe it to be fraud because they're still working here, and then you still have to fill out all the information as if it was a regular claim. So I think that's pretty much all I had regarding what's our story is and how it's affecting our employees. But thank you for your time.
Thanks for that. If you would have the individual that is so frustrated that he can't use the system, he's just going to pay the taxes generated by the 1099. If you'd have him give me a call, I'll do the best I can to help him.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any questions? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the testimony. Just on myself, I've received two notifications. One was slightly off on the address, and it also had a different Social Security number on it. And I heard you mention that the address might not be quite right. I wonder, are there any that you did get multiple claims for, and did you ever see instances where the social did not match the name of the person that they were going after? And I might be curious from other folks that are testifying to see how widespread some of that is.
Well, I should restate, I guess, that it is the last 4 that I match it with, I think. And I've never had any of those be in here. I only received duplicate claims for one individual throughout this whole time. And I was also going to mention too, just so you have this piece of information, of all the claims that we filed throughout the year that saying they were fraud and that the person was still employed full time, we only received 1 denial thus far, stating that the person was not going to receive benefits because they were a full-time employee. So that makes it feel like also that only 1 out of my 60 some responses was processed.
Representative Johnson, what we've seen in the last few weeks or month is that the criminals have kind of wised up and figured out if they can change the address a little bit, the individual doesn't get that statement and it goes to another house and therefore gets discarded. And the individual doesn't call in to say that it was fraud. And so they get a few more weeks out of it that way because they know that we're slow in getting these statements to our employees or employers, and employers only have a certain amount of time to reply, and if they don't, the claim gets paid. And so that's one of the reasons you're seeing these with different information on them, just so they can get the money quicker. So far, everybody's kind of said that the claim started in October. Can you tell me, Nicole, would it be beneficial? You're not going to know about these claims, whether they were paid or not,
right? Because
there's no way on the portal to find out. And so you are issued a charge statement each year, but that you're probably not going to get that until November or December, and at that point, it's going to be way too late. You'll already be affected. Would it be beneficial to you if we were to be able to get charge statements sent out, say effective February 1st, so that you can get a better handle on at least the 4th quarter of last year, like our schools are seeing now?
Yes, absolutely. I think just like many reports that we receive tax-wise quarterly, moving forward even would be much more beneficial for everybody when it comes to budgeting and planning purposes.
They should be able to at least put on the portal. You should be able to see
Yeah.
it monthly, but they're not quite there yet. But we do need to probably get. There's a lot of employees that have no idea how bad they've been affected, and if we could get a charge statement issued earlier, we think that we'd identify a lot of this fraud a lot quicker. Representative Arcam has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Gillock, thanks for your time today. Can you go over one of your last statements? If I heard you correctly, you filed 60 fraudulent claims, and you received only 1 reply that the claim was denied. How did you receive that reply, and what's a normal? I think you said about 5 to 8 claims per year was your historical norm. You get a denial of the claim back. How does that come, and what did you expect this year when you submitted those 60?
Yes, usually we receive the response. I would say definitely not more than 30 days on a normal year. We do dispute unemployment claims depending on the type of termination. So I have received plenty of responses over the years, and they come in the mail by paper. I don't believe that the side system is capable of that yet at this time. So we do still get those by paper, and I did receive that in the mail by paper, and just again stating that this employee would be denied benefits because they were working full time. I don't have anything to compare that to in 2020 because very fortunately we have not terminated anybody recently that applied for unemployment. So I don't know that if I had one apply, if the process would have played out the same as it had in previous years, because I didn't have any claims against us that were valid.
Representative Everkamp.
Just to verify, you sent in 60 claims saying these are fraud, and out of those 60, you only received one reply that the claim was denied.
Correct.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, we'll move on. Thanks so much for your time. Looks like Rick Kraus, are you online?
I am.
Welcome to committee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell a little bit about the USD 308 story. My name is Rick Kraus. This is my 16th year of HR in Hutchinson Public Schools. We employ roughly 920-ish people. I have provided to you my written testimony, so it is not my desire to regurgitate that to you. And I do not want to sing the 47th verse of the unemployment fraud song, because I know you're hearing a lot of that already. I do want to speak more to perhaps some of the structural issues that I have addressed in my written testimony. I do want to say on the front side, though, that this really, to me, is more about a systems problem and not a people problem. I've had nothing but positive responses from people at the Kansas Department of Labor when I called for their support. So I just want to make sure that you understand that. As I look at my testimony, I guess I'm going to draw your attention to item number 8. And to give some highlights, I think this exemplifies more of the deep systems issues that you need to look at overhauling as a part of your work going forward. In this scenario, on December 22nd, I had an employee who had an unemployment fraud claim filed against her. I completed the fraud report and the report in sides as well, stating that it was a fraud claim. Then on January 6th, she reaches out to me to inform me that she had received a benefits debit card in the mail with her unemployment. I called the Department of Labor and was instructed to have her just shred that benefits card. I think this shows two flaws in the system. A, the completion of the fraud report did not stop the claim as it should have. And then secondly, I did not receive an employer's determination notice, which would have indicated to me that she was going to receive unemployment benefits, which at that point in time would have allowed me to again appeal to notate that this was a fraud issue. And so two processes broke down and it resulted in a claim awarded to an employee who did not file for unemployment. The side note is, I'll weave in a little bit of response to, I believe, Representative Johnson. This benefits card was sent to an unknown address. It was non-existent. The post office, to their credit, was able to track her down and get that statement in her hands. So it is a potential additional fraud issue that could have occurred had somebody come across that benefits card without her knowledge. But real quick, Representative Johnson, I jotted real quickly some of the scenarios that I have received unemployment claims. A lot of maiden names from teachers. The furthest one back was 1996, which gives you some indication of when the identity may have been stolen. Lots of early 2000s. I've had a variety of names who have not worked for us, but the Social Security numbers did match current employees. And so that's another tip off for me. I had an employee who called me who received the benefits notice in the mail, called to say, hey, what is this? I kind of explained, my frustration that I did not receive notification in size and the steps he needed to follow. Then he called back to say, Rick, I just noticed the Social Security number on this benefit statement does not match mine or my family. So the good news for him was, at that point in time, he was not a victim of identity theft. The second half of that story is about 10 days later, I did get the notification and he was a victim officially at that point in time. We've had a lot of spouses' names used as the name on the claim. And lastly, it happened just the middle name of an employee was used as the first name. And so there are lots of little tweaks like that that will indicate when a fraud claim is actually taking place. You've already heard about the stress on employees. I did a little informal straw poll in January on the amount of time employees spend on the phone trying to protect their identity. That range ran from 2 to more than 5. A complicator was the Fed sending out the latest round of COVID relief payments, which created a lot of additional backlog of time on the phone. So it is a challenge. I will let you know that in comment to Mr. Flashbar's statements early on, that for the first time in life forever, I had no claims, no unemployment claims this morning when I checked sides. And so I am cautiously optimistic that this is something that perhaps we've turned a good corner on. With that, I can answer any of your questions that you may have on the testimony that I provided to you, or anything else that you would like me to address.
Sir, I'm looking at your testimony. Fraud claims since December 1st, 265 claims, and then you multiplied it by the weekly benefit for $111,000. That's a week, right?
Yep.
And then if you go back, 500 claims, it's $179,000 a week. And these are what will come to you. You're a reimbursing employer, right?
We are not rated. And so I work with Phil Hayes to come up with some numbers to give you, because I know you're talking to a lot of reimbursing employers. My fear going forward is I won't know the change to our system, our charges, until June. So I'm still using last June's rate in the midst of a pre-kind of pandemic time, and perhaps looking more post-pandemic, what may happen to our rate. And so we're having some conversation now about what we might need to do in anticipation of a potential budget impact.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, thanks so much for your testimony today. Melanie Hockersmith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Melanie Hockersmith, and I am the HR administrator for Mitten Incorporated in Oakley, Kansas. We're a travel center. We have 74 employees, and we have had 11 claims so far that are fraudulent, one on myself included, and one on our president. Just the other day, just for an example, I know it's in my testimony, but I received 3 claims in the mail, all are in the. And of those 3 claims, the first one was a current employee that his name was Steve X, former employee that was X Perry, and the name was for Steve Perry, non-existent employee with a completely different employee's social security number. I believe just from the earlier that new implementation that should stop at least that one from going through, because obviously the social don't match. But just, I mean, my experience is the same as a lot of the ones that have already testified, that it's just a lot of time consuming, a lot of reassuring of employees because they're confused as to why they claim anything. And then, you know, did I get fired and I didn't know it? That kind of thing. And I also did just help on Tuesday, an employee that received a 1099-G. I helped her file the dispute online to get a corrected 1099 because, you know, obviously she did not receive any unemployment benefits. So other than, I mean, mostly just what everybody already said before, just to reiterate what they said. I mean, I think we're all in the same boat. Of all of my claims, I have not received any notifications from the state that the claims were denied as fraudulent or anything like that.
Okay, so Melanie, on the individual that brought you the 1099-G, was that one of the claims that you had reported as fraudulent?
Yes, it was.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. We'll move on to Judy Mount.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Judy Mount and I'm the Executive Director of Human Resources at WSU Tech in Wichita. And I'm here to talk about my experience with fraudulent unemployment claims just since October of 2020. We've received 142 fraudulent claims between October and yesterday. And this morning in the mail, I got 14 more, so we can add that to it. That's about 30% of our total workforce. The potential charge to WSU Tech is $760,422, but those additional 14 claims this morning will add another $119,000 to that total. It's just been my mission to notify every employee when I receive an employer notice of claim. And I'm pretty stunned that most of the people had never received any kind of notice in the mail. So it became apparent that fake or old addresses were being used when filing the claim. So if I had not notified the employee, like I said, it's my mission to do so to try to protect them. They would have never known about it, and it could have been really devastating financially for them for that breach in their personal information. So I am reporting on a timely manner. I have never received a claim determination notice on any of them. And my employees are currently receiving the 1099 forms indicating that the claim was paid and that they're now responsible for the taxes. So we're dealing with that. But I mean, you've heard from everybody else how long it's taking to file the claims. And I've been joking that it's my part-time job in addition to my full-time job. So, but it's not really funny to say that anymore. So the rest of my statement in writing is pretty critical and preachy, so I choose not to share that with the group, but it's about the antiquated computer systems.
I think most of us here share your concerns on all of that, and I assure you we're working on solutions. I'm looking at your testimony. So the 760, are you a reimbursing employer, or are you
No.
you're in the trust fund?
Yes.
Okay, so these charges were to the trust fund or will be to the trust fund. Any questions? Representative Auerkamp.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for your time today. Throughout this process, 142 claims, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of people, especially from one organization. Were you ever contacted by anybody from the state just to double check the numbers, looking at, you know, WSU Tech? Seems like a lot of claims coming from you, could be fraud. Anybody ever contact you and ask any questions about if you were laying off or letting go a lot of people?
No. And we did not have layoffs all through this last year.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Seeing none. Thanks so much for your testimony. We'll move on to Trisha Mcpherson.
Thank you, Chairperson. So my name is Trisha Mcpherson. I'm the HR Director at Grace Med Health Clinic, and we have 15 different locations across the state of Kansas. We employ approximately 330 employees, and we are a federally qualified health center. So as you can imagine, throughout the COVID pandemic, we have been very busy with various operations. And unfortunately, the fraudulent claims for us started coming in almost immediately. We started seeing some of those, much like many of my HR peers across the state. We have some similar experiences with those claims coming in under spouses' names, different addresses, maiden names, sent to us as the employer versus the employee, not receiving determination notices, all of those things. For us, we actually became a reimbursing employer about 2 years ago, specifically for the purpose of controlling our expenses. And so the thing for me that I think is the most frustrating is we have always been very quick at turning around the time frame for unemployment claims. I'm very familiar with that process, and I know the steps that we need to go through to make sure that we get the state their information on a regular basis. And so I know that, previous to the pandemic, there are processes in place that would prevent any type of wrong claim going through, even if it was just not a fake claim, but an employee who just wanted to try to game the system, that those claims should not be paid unless the employer has had an opportunity to respond, and then that the state has determined, yes, this employee is indeed eligible for this funding. And unfortunately, I feel like that process has just completely broken down throughout this time frame. At the beginning when we were getting claims, they appeared to even be targeting high wage earners. Obviously, the higher wage earner would also then receive the higher unemployment claims. So we have had almost 75% of our C-suite employees targeted, as well as a number of our physicians and dental providers. Altogether, with our fraudulent claims, we've had about a third of our workforce impacted now, as well as, again, their spouses and other people impacted through that. We did have about 20 staff early in the pandemic when dental offices were shut down that did have to go on furlough. And so it became frustrating that some of those employees were unable to get their unemployment that they needed, but yet fraudulent criminals were being able to get paid some of those claims as well. I don't blame the Kansas Department of Labor for the fact that fraudulent claims are coming through. To me, that's no different than phishing attempt emails where they try to scam you and send you things. Those criminals are always going to be looking for an easy opportunity. Unfortunately, I just feel like that our state has given them an easy opportunity to come after those. And the reason I say that is, again, those processes, I feel like they have broken down where the state is not slowing down enough to even respond to the claims that we turn in. We committed early on that with as many fraudulent claims as we were getting, that we were going to turn them back around to our third-party vendor that we use, which is UIS, Unemployment Insurance Services. They've been a great partner with us, and so we send claim data back to them within 24 hours, sometimes way less than that, just to make sure that things get to the state timely. And yet, for example, in the fourth quarter statement that we just received, there were 20 unique charges on that statement. 16 of those 20 charges were fraudulent. 4 of them are still pending, with one of them being a legitimate claim. And all 16 of those fraudulent charges, we show proof of reporting them as fraud, both through the Kansas reporting portal as individuals. We helped our employees do that, as well as through UIS. And so on that statement, those 16 fraudulent charges that were reported got paid out to the tune of approximately $13,000 in just one quarter. And I can't imagine what the other claims would look like if, all 48 of the claims that we actually received as fraudulent during that time frame had actually processed in some way. So that told me they were only catching about half, even though we were reporting all 48 during that fourth quarter as fraudulent. My issue there is just that, we need to get this right the first time. We need to not let these dollars go out the door of our state. So I really propose that the state needs to almost implement their previous processes they had in place. They used to catch people who weren't eligible for claims. And it feels like right now, even though as employers we're submitting data, that those claims are just not being processed or being taken care of appropriately. As an employer, it feels frustrating because if we're committed to doing our part and working with our employees to do their part, we just need the Department of Labor to do the same on their end. So.
Well, thank you. And as a reporting employer, or as a reimbursing employer, that $13,000 comes to you in the form of a bill that you have to pay to reimburse the state for paying those claims, even though you report them as fraud. What did UIS advise you to do? Did they say to hold on and wait and we'll fight those, or wait for this bill to go through to hold you harmless? Or
Yeah, I actually heard Jeff's testimony to you guys last week, the president of UIS, and he was right on. We were probably one of those employers that had something in his email before he even got in Monday morning. We received our quarterly statement in the mail, and immediately I pulled it out and wrote out which of those were fraudulent claims and sent that to their office and said, hey guys, help me out. I know there's an appeal process here. I don't know what to do. And so he said, yes, we're working on that. Thank you for, submitting the data. We'll work with the Department of Labor. Don't pay those until, we get an amended quarterly statement. So.
okay, and so you're not alone.
Nope.
You're not alone for sure. We got a notification from the Wichita School District that they got a bill for $770,000 this weekend. So it's adding up pretty quick. And I think we've been talking to the Department of Labor. I think they're planning on doing something, holding you harmless anyway. But all those funds are paid out of the state unemployment trust fund, and then you're to reimburse them. So the money's got to come from somewhere, but it certainly shouldn't have to come from someone that reported fraudulent claims and still had to pay them. So we hear you, and we're working on it, I promise.
Thank you.
Seeing no questions, we'll move on to our final virtual conferee, and that's Shelby Smith.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. My name is Shelby Smith, and I am with ISI Environmental. We're an environmental health and safety services firm located in Wichita. We currently have about 115 employees, and we actually received our first fraudulent claim back in May of 2020, and we've had about 25 total. 24 of those were current employees, and one was a former employee. And so that represents about 20% of our current employees being impacted by the fraudulent claims. It's very similar to how the others have testified. We have received all of ours through the SIDE system. We have not been notified of any other mailings that have been received from people's homes other than those that have coincided with what was received in the SIDE system. So as I mentioned, a lot of our experience has been the same as what has been testified to here. I would like to mention that we have also utilized the shared work program through the Kansas Department of Labor for starting in August, and that 2 of our employees who received fraudulent claims were some of our shared work participants. And so these are employees that were entitled to the unemployment compensation for the hours that they did not work through the shared work program, but then struggled to get their payments because they had a fraudulent claim filed against them. And so ultimately, with the shared work program, the employer is the one that initiates that claim. And so in discussion with these 2 employees, they had opted to take the KDOL issued debit card and actually never went in and set up an account. So they didn't, they weren't required to, and so they just never did. They took the payments on the card. And so it is my belief that what happened is that somebody then set up an account for them, because when they they were then locked out of their accounts, and the direct deposit information within the account had been changed, and so that their payments were going to a different account. So those worked kind of very similar to the other fraudulent claims, other than these particular employees were to be receiving unemployment through the shared work program. I had one other circumstance which was a little bit different with a shared work participant. She actually had set up her account when she initially started the shared work program, and she put in her own direct deposit information for payment. She wasn't having any issues, and then she started missing payments. And so we were trying to figure out what was going on with why her payments weren't coming through. And in the process of doing that, she found that her direct deposit information within her account had been changed. So with that, she had to have her account reset. She got a new debit card, was getting payments on the debit card, and then shortly thereafter, she went in again and noticed that her direct deposit information had been changed yet again. So we never got a claim related to her account, but somehow her direct deposit information was getting changed within the system and impacting her payments. So, you know, we are also concerned about how the impact is going to be moving forward. You know, with our calculations, you know, we're pretty close to what the rest of the group is, and you know, estimating somewhere around over a 500% increase in our costs should all these fraudulent claims be paid out. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. And on the changing the bank accounts, we're seeing more and more of that, where people are hacking in and changing bank accounts, and our constituents, they just stop receiving payments, and then there's nowhere for them to go. They try to call in, and there's nobody answers the call. Most of them don't think to call their representative, but the ones that do, we're able to help them, and we're able to help them quickly because the Department of Labor does a good job of getting back to people. We have a question for you, but before we do that, we're planning, at least in the bill that we're going to be looking at tomorrow, to continue the shared work program. Can you opine to that a little bit and tell us kind of how that's working for you? And is that a benefit that you're enjoying, and is it actually saving jobs?
Yes, we have been using the shared work program. This was our first time to use it, and yes, it has saved jobs. You know, during with the pandemic, some of the workload that we've had been reduced, and you know, we were having some of our clients weren't allowing us to be on site, and so we were you know, we were looking at how can we address, you know, these workload changes and still yet be prepared to come back when, you know, when everybody was ready to start coming back to work. And so the shared work program has worked really well for us. We started out with about 20 employees on the shared work plan. And we've brought half of them back on a full-time basis now, and hopefully we can get the rest of them back here shortly as well. So I think it's been a very beneficial program, and would highly encourage that you consider continuing that, because it's helped us be able to keep those employees employed, you know, granted with you know, with one day less work, but then we were able to bring them back pretty easily too. So I think it's been a great program, and would encourage you to continue that.
The more I learn about the shared work program, the more I like it. It's nice to be able to get your same employees back and know that they're going to be there. You don't have to train somebody new. You don't have to go find a new employee, and it keeps them off the unemployment rolls. We have a question for you from Representative Miller. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ma'am, on the account, was there, you might not know this, but was there any ability to trace that account? Did it drop in a black hole across the ocean, or was that local, or we have any idea knowing if there's any possibility of prosecution?
I do not know. I believe our employee wrote that down, but I don't know where it came from. So, I mean, she may still have that information that we could ask of her, but I don't know where it went to.
The department, of course, is aware of it. KDOL knows that event occurred. Question.
Shelby, he's asking a question to you. If you did make the Department of Labor aware that that happened, right, and they have documentation of it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, yes, we made the Department of Labor aware. They were very helpful in handling that situation.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions for you, thanks so much for your testimony today, and it's good to see that the work share program is actually working.
Thank you.
Committee, there's a packet of written testimony. It's about 32 pages long. I haven't got through them all yet, but I mean, there's some pretty compelling stories in there as well. And I think what we're kind of realizing here is it's not just, it's not just an issue for the state of Kansas. It's not just the trust fund. I mean, there's a human factor involved. It's costing our businesses time and money to go through all of this as well. And there's a lot of angst and concern out there. And so tomorrow is the day that we start to try to find solutions. We've got the bill. We're going to read the bill in tomorrow. We're going to learn about it and go through it page by page and then comment on it. We won't have testimony until next week. So if you get a chance to start looking through the bill, it is a large bill and there's a lot in it, and there'll probably end up being a lot more in it as we go through. So we appreciate you all taking the time and working so hard with us on this. And hopefully, in the next few weeks, we'll be able to be proud of some of the work we got done in here. And thanks a lot. We're going to adjourn, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.